After another devastating concussion, it may be time for Tua Tagovailoa to call it quits. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to another edition of Locked On NFL. It is the new Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by the mastermind himself, Locked On NFL expert Ross Jackson. On today's show, we are going to take a look at some 0-1 teams that things could get ugly for if they drop to 0-2. Also, some 1-0 teams like the Minnesota Vikings that need to prove it to us. But we got to start with the loss in Miami, and it's not just the game. It is the loss of Tua Tagovailoa, who suffered another brutal concussion. Before we get into it, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Make sure that you tune in later and step into the barbershop with Tony Wiggins as he chops up some of the hottest NFL topics on the second edition of Locked On NFL. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions do apply. So the Miami Dolphins lost once again to the Buffalo Bills, 31-10. The data queen herself, Michelle Majuk, was on yesterday with me here on Locked On NFL, and she broke down just how historic Josh Allen's dominance over the Dolphins has been. But to put salt in the wound, Tua took another bad concussion, and at this point, you do have to worry about his career trajectory at some point. We're going to hear from Kyle Krabs at Locked On Dolphins, who broke down the Thursday night loss.
Miami Dolphins suffered yet another loss to the Buffalo Bills in Week 2 of the 2024 season, but all of that really feels secondary to the major development that happened late in the third quarter, with starting quarterback Tua Tagovailoa suffering another concussion at the hands of a hit by Buffalo safety Damar Hamlin. This being the second time in 3 seasons an AFC showcase with the Dolphins and an AFC contender on Thursday Night Football has yielded Tagovailoa leaving the field with a head injury. The Dolphins confirmed that it was a concussion and ruled him out quickly after the injury happened. Thankfully, he was able to walk off the field on his own power. But with the concussion history that is very well documented for Tua Tagovailoa, it leaves a number of questions, both short-term and long-term, for the Dolphins. First and foremost, the thing that's most important is that Tua Tagovailoa heals in however much time he needs.
All right, Ross, I get it. People are going to be wondering whether Tua should keep playing. I'm in the book of let a grown man decide a grown man's future. If Tua wants to continue playing, then he should continue to play. But if he doesn't, then make the decision to walk away. Here's what I do got to say, though. We all hope that Tua is healthy. We hope he lives a long life and he's able to play with his kids and his grandkids and all of that. All of that must be acknowledged, that life is bigger than football, and we hope nothing for the best for Tua. But at the same time, if we talk about the football, the reality is Tua was not good in this game. He had 3 interceptions. Maybe the first 2 aren't 100% on him. That could be argued. But the third one, no one thought that someone would make a dumber play than Will Levis this weekend or during this football season. But Tua said, hold my beer, I'm going to do it. And then the reality is the play that he got concussed on, he was past the first down marker and he unnecessarily took the hit.
Slide, man.
Right.
Like, you know your history, dude.
Yeah. It was a bit surprising that he wasn't going to slide, especially with the game the way that it was. But I got to point this out. It's 24-10. they're driving when he makes that critical mistake and throws that pick six. That ends the game. If that drive flips the other way and they score 7, it's a 7-point game. They're right in it in the fourth quarter, and the game is totally different. So the first 2 may not have been on him, but he didn't do anything in the first half to get his team out of it with an extraordinary play because he doesn't have the playmaking ability that some of the better quarterbacks in the NFL have. And then he makes the critical mistake to hurt his team, which is what Tua's not supposed to do. At the end of the day, Ross, he doesn't make big plays in big moments. They can't beat the Buffalo Bills. If they don't beat the Buffalo Bills, they can't win their division. If they don't win their division, they can't get a home playoff game. Tua can't win in cold weather. So if they don't get a home playoff game, they can't win a playoff game. And with the concussion stuff added onto it, it's a wonder how this is going to play out in Miami long term, not only for this season, but seasons beyond.
Yeah, this is one of the things that's been very interesting to me about Tua Tagovailoa's career so far. Everybody sort of speaks about him as this system quarterback, but I think it goes deeper than that, Tyler. Not only is he a system quarterback, but everything around him needs to be perfect. He's not somebody that tends to handle adversity very well. I think that he's a guy that, doesn't operate out of structure as well, can't improvise as well. And when things aren't going well around him, he's not the guy that's going to be able to lift your team and get you to a victory. Not only was his play an issue, but the defensive play was a massive issue for Miami in this game, particularly in run defense or lack thereof. And Tua Tagovailoa just can't prove or hasn't yet proven to be the quarterback that can get you out of those situations.
100%. And I think when you talk about him, the term that we could use, game manager, well, the thing is, the modern game manager in the NFL can get out of those situations and can improvise. Look at a Brock Purdy. Look at a Jordan Love. Look at a Dak Prescott. Players like that, they're game managers too. They're not Pat Mahomes. They're not Josh Allen. They're not Lamar Jackson. But they manage the game and have that little bit of, hey, I can get us out of a jam if we get into one. And Tua doesn't have that. So if it's not in the structure of the play, he's going to give you very, very little. And I would compare Tua to an NBA all-star, Tyrese Halliburton from the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers play a breakneck style in how they speed up and down the court. Tyrese Halliburton looks like baby Magic Johnson with the pace that they play at. But when you get into the real games and they play the Celtics when it mattered, he was nowhere to be found. Had some good games later in the series, but the point is, Tua looks really good in an explosive, fast offense that's really fun to watch in the regular season. But when it comes to the big moments, he's never going to be a guy that gets it done. And obviously, we want him to be healthy, but that's the reality of the football situation for the Dolphins and Tua. Now, on the other side, with the Buffalo Bills, I mean, this is a big win for them. And some people were talking about the demise of Buffalo, but they look primed and ready.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I was concerned about going into this game was, could Josh Allen do it all? Could he do enough? Because he barely did enough to help to lift the Buffalo Bills over the Arizona Cardinals last week. But you know what? He didn't have to do it by himself. He had the help of a defense, and he had the help of an outstanding game from James Cook with 3 rushing touchdowns in this one as well. And I think that this also highlighted a big issue for Miami, letting Christian Wilkins walk, which is probably their worst decision of the offseason.
100%. And when me and Alex were talking about this earlier in the season, back into the offseason, I was really big on the move for Christian Wilkins for the Raiders and big on it being a loss for the Dolphins. The Bills got more physical this offseason. The Dolphins got less physical this offseason. And if you're looking at the EPA per play numbers, running game is starting to be just as efficient as passing game. We're seeing that cyclical NFL nature start to take course. And I agree with you 100%. Not having that interior pressure from Wilkins, I think it's going to be a big detriment to the Miami Dolphins.
Big time. Yep. You can feel as good about your run defense as you want, but you can't combat space. And I think that when you don't have that interior pressure, you're not able to hold up against space at all. It makes it even worse for you. It just compounds the issue.
100%. But there are some teams in the NFL that are still at 1-0 that really need to prove it to us. I'm looking at you, Sam Darnold in Minnesota. We're going to discuss that. Do want to remind you, make sure to check out Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, the barber, in the barber shop. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster, and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you aren't looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, and why is that? Well, they're America's #1 sportsbook, but I got something a little bit different for you this time. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. If that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday 9:15 pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday 9/12. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook today. All right, Ross, we're going to continue today's Locked On NFL. We got a pretty entertaining Thursday night football game, even if it wasn't the closest. Obviously, we're worried about Tua, hoping that he's all right, but the Bills really made a statement. Now there are some teams who need to make a statement, and I would say they need to prove it this week. Looking at you, Sam Darnold, in the Minnesota Vikings, and looking at you, Baker Mayfield, in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to start with this Minnesota Vikings San Francisco 49ers matchup because it is going to be an excellent game, at least on paper, and there's a lot of juicy storylines going into this one. The big one, Sam Darnold against his former team, the San Francisco 49ers. Let's hear from Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings, about how Sam Darnold has been in Minnesota.
Yeah, so that's 2 years that we've been hearing about it, but it's always been in theory. So to see him go out and even against a bad team to just execute properly was really like, oh, okay, they weren't lying to us. This wasn't just PR. But actually, like if you asked him or if you asked Kevin O'Connell, they'd probably say the same thing. He would say like, yeah, no, being with the 49ers, being with Kyle Shanahan kind of was this like level up moment for him. And I think also just being like a designated backup and not like being in competition for the job and just kind of having a year to like reflect on everything and sort of let all those lessons that I learned from all those mistakes with the Jets and Panthers like soak in. It was just like a perfect environment for him to like sort of decompress, regroup, and with the culture and the coaching that you guys have over there in San Francisco, to really grow into a new version of himself. So we're all excited to see what he's going to do.
Leave it to the brain, Luke Braun, to give us all the nuance on him resetting spiritually and all that. Of course, Luke is on top of all that. But look, at the end of the day, they beat the Giants last week. It looked good. Sam Darnold was like, 20 for 20 before he finally missed a pass. Tongue in cheek, of course, but he had a very good game. And I think you look at Kevin O'Connell and the offense that they run in Minnesota. And I think that's why people had hope for Sam Darnold, that he could do this with Minnesota. But at the end of the day, that was against the Giants, man. And I'm not going to buy into that yet. If you go and do that against the San Francisco 49ers, your former team who kind of rehabilitated your spirit as a quarterback. Now I sound like Luke. He's rubbing off on me a little bit.
Channeling some Luke there.
Also worth noting that San Francisco lost to Minnesota last year, and Brian Flores brought the house against Brock Purdy. And some people would say that it was Brock Purdy's worst game as a 49er.
Yeah.
So you look at what they have. Jonathan Bullard, they add there. Harrison Phillips got new money. Jerry Tillery is added. Jonathan Grenard is added. Andrew Van Ginkel making plays last week as well. They have Dallas Turner, the rookie. This is a really good front. Brian Flores is probably going to be able to get more out of this defense than he even was last year. So I need Minnesota to go out and prove it. Do you think that Minnesota has that within them against San Francisco?
I'll be honest, I don't think Sam Darnold does. I would love to say that there is the revenge game factor, but he actually no reason for revenge against San Francisco. That actually helped him heal, right? In terms of everything we've been discussing here. But I'll tell you where I think that they do get the opportunity to prove themselves, and it's the defense that you were just highlighting with Brian Flores. I think Brian Flores' defensive system, he was actually ranked the number 2 defensive play caller this week, or coming out of week 1, by Peyton Analytics, who does some fantastic coaching research. And I think we've seen that over and over again from Brian Flores. And I think, honestly, too, Tyler, I know he's got a lot going on around him in terms of like the NFL landscape, but he should be a head coach again very, very soon. And I think a solid game against San Francisco again will only place him higher on that pedestal. I think he's the reason that Minnesota has the opportunity to prove itself against San Francisco this weekend.
Well, he was the difference maker last year when those teams played. So it would be very, very on point for him to be that again. Now, flipping over to the other game that I think is a prove-it game, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going against the Detroit Lions. So these teams have played 3 times in like the last 11 months, and Baker Mayfield looked excellent. I think Todd Bowles is kind of like a Brian Flores should look to Todd Bowles as somebody who he could kind of model. Maybe he'd want to have a little bit more success or whatever. But Todd Bowles has done some great things in the NFL and that pressure defense that he runs. And now Baker Mayfield with 3 good wide receivers. I think that's an opportunity for the Buccaneers to show, hey, we didn't just beat up on the lowly Commanders. We can really play if we go in and take down Detroit like we weren't able to do last year. And Matt Derry and James Yarko talked about that on this Crossover Thursday.
How efficient Baker Mayfield was in week 1 with new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. He was the FedEx Air Player of the Week, went 24 for 30 for 289 and 4 touchdowns. An absolutely phenomenal performance from Baker Mayfield. And a big part of that is because they finally have a legitimate wide receiver 3. If you go back to last year and you think, there was Mike Evans, there was Chris Godwin, and there really wasn't much else. Now they have Jalen McMillan, a guy who is going to be a star in the NFL. He has everything that you look for in a wide receiver. Now that takes a little bit of the pressure off Mike, a little bit of the pressure off of Chris, and then they add Bucky Irving in the backfield as well, and he can do everything that Rashad can do. He can run the ball, he can pick up blitzes, he can make plays out of the backfield as a pass catcher, and all of these things have now really put Baker Mayfield into a comfortable spot, and that was on full display against Washington.
I appreciate the confidence personally, but Jalen McMillan being a star, that's a spicy one.
Pump the brakes a little bit.
Right there. Here's what I got to say, Ross. Like I said with Minnesota, you don't get to play the Commanders every week. And the Commanders recently have done a mass exodus of talent on their defensive line. Like they lose Montez Sweat. Chase Young doesn't work out. They add Dorrance Armstrong, who, in my opinion, is a good backup edge rusher like he was for the Cowboys. Clelin Ferrell, first-round bust, quite honestly, after being picked by the Raiders. The Commanders do not have a good pass rush, and I think that an area of weakness for the Bucs is the offensive line, and I don't think that offensive line was severely tested last week. So the Lions are going to be a much bigger test. So this is a prove-it game. If the Bucs offensive line can look good against Detroit, then I will believe in the Bucs. But for now, I think the Lions kind of run over them.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I think the Lions run over them too. And I think literally run over them, because the other thing that I think you're looking at to flip the script here is that the Washington Commanders, one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, the Detroit Lions, one of the absolute best. And whether that comes down to individual personnel or scheme, however it is that you want to look at it, one of the absolute best in the NFL, as long as they stay healthy. And so I think that ends up being another place where Tampa gets very much tested, in that it'll operate or create a situation where Baker Mayfield doesn't get to operate with such comfort. And we've seen over and over again that when that comfort isn't there, Baker tends to fold. And so if Detroit can control the clock and run the football, and then therefore make things a little bit tougher on Baker Mayfield, I think some of that efficiency ends up ticking down, and that causes Tampa some trouble.
Yeah, and I also think in this matchup that the Bucs will have much more trouble running the football. I mean, Baker was airing
Agreed.
it out. You're going to have to run the football against the Lions, and I don't know if the Bucs can do it. But hey, they get to go out on Sunday and prove it. So that's what we're going to be looking for. Now, there are some teams that are 0-1 right now who were expected to be contenders and to be good teams, and they need to prove that they aren't the 0-1 team, the 0-2 team that they look like they could be. And one of them is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And speaking of the Jaguars, make sure that you check out Tony Wiggins on Locked On NFL. He's probably going to hear about what I got to say. Interesting to see what Tony's reaction is there. But again, make sure you tune in to Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. There is a reason that there's over 5 million active members on Prize Picks. It's so easy to play. Prize Picks has a projection for every player. Here's some loose examples. All right, Baker Mayfield, 200 passing yards, or you could even maybe see Mike Evans for 60 receiving yards. Those are just examples of what you might see, but you pick 2 to 6 players and just say whether they're going to do more or less. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly. When you play $5, you don't even need to win to receive your $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Ross, we are going to cap off this Football Friday edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, the madman, with the mastermind himself, Ross Jackson. We've talked about the Thursday night football matchup. We've hit the 1-0 teams that need to prove it. Now we need to talk about some of these 0-1 teams that need to prove that they aren't 0-1 level teams. And a big one on my list is a team that everyone is going to keep an eye on. They're going to be one of the hot button teams in the NFL this year, and it's the New York Football Jets. And Ross, I got to tell you, there's a fatal flaw to the New York Jets. And my guy, John Butchko from Locked On Jets, broke it down on this week's Crossover Thursday.
Not only that, but, on at the defensive tackle position, Quinton Williams did not have a good game, but the guys from next to him, Javon Kinlaw, Solomon Thomas, those guys got pushed around. And that number 2 defensive tackle spot was a question heading into the season. I think the linebackers are good. CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams are excellent duo. Arguably one of the top duos in the league. The corners are great. Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter II. I would argue the top trio in the league. This defensive line, though, if you get pushed around, you can't control the point of attack. Even if you're really talented on the second and third levels, you're going to have issues. And I have a lot of concerns about this Jets defense because, look, Kyle Shanahan attack, sure, but no Christian McCaffrey. 49ers line's not that great. And even the guy who is a great player, Trent Williams, he kind of stepped in after a holdout for the entire training camp. That was a very troubling performance week 1.
Ross, let me tell you a couple of things. Number one, 108 of the 180 rushing yards San Francisco got on the Jets in week 1 outside the tackles. 23 of the 28 runs that San Francisco went were outside zone or zone runs. So they just said, look, your front 4 on defense is not going to be able to hold up, and we are going to get to the second level, and we're going to bully you. Because as John broke down, also in the Crossover Thursday, the Jets are a team that wins up front and wants speed in the back end. If you win up front, you keep guys off your speed, and your linebackers and your DBs with speed can flow. Well, the downside to having smaller, faster guys is they can't get off blocks as well. And if your defensive front isn't eating blocks up and keeping bodies off of your second level, then you're going to struggle. And that is exactly what San Francisco did. So we could talk about Aaron Rodgers and we could talk about his lack of mobility, which was very apparent. obviously done my film study on the Jets this week to prepare. But one other thing I want to point out is the travel.
Yeah.
Jets went across the country to San Francisco and played on Monday Night Football on a short week, have to come back to New York and then fly to Tennessee and play the Titans. That is a lot of travel within the span of 6 days, playing on a short week and playing in a game that will be physical because the hurricane, which you know a little bit about, Ross, will be impacting Nashville, and it will be very rainy and very sloshy. I don't know if that's a word, but I think everyone knows
it is now
where I'm going for. So I guess I say all that to say this. I think the Jets are frauds, and I think they're going 0-2, and I think there's going to be panic pressed in New York.
Oh, yeah, man. I would not want to be a team subjected to New York media after this weekend if I am the Jets, because I don't think this is going to go great for them at all, because I think they have two fatal flaws, and it does go back to Aaron Rodgers and his lack of mobility. The only reason why we're still talking about Aaron Rodgers at this point is because of the stuff he's done off the field. There's nothing to discuss when it comes to Aaron Rodgers on the field these days at all. And I know that he missed the entire season, but also that's part of his age showing at this point.
Yes.
And I severely doubt that we see an improved Aaron Rodgers from 2 years ago at this point in this New York Jets offense, regardless of the young weapons that they have. And by the way, just like you mentioned with those outside zone runs, it's just like we were talking about earlier with the Miami Dolphins defense, space kills run defense. And you saw that for New York against San Francisco.
100%. And I think there are some other things that kind of show what's going on. Aaron Rodgers only got sacked once. He only got pressured 6 times. And people are looking at that as a good thing. But look at his time to throw and his ADOT.
Yep.
Look at his average depth of target. He was just getting rid of the ball as quick as possible because he's 40 years old. He's off an Achilles. He can't play make anymore like he used to and get out of the pocket and make those crazy cross-body throws. He knows it. He doesn't want to get hit, so he's just getting the ball out as quick as possible. And Nathaniel Hackett isn't a creative enough playmaker, and outside of Garrett Wilson, they don't have enough good receiving options to get open to run that kind of offense. So I think that there are some issues for the Jets that I don't think are going to get cleared up anytime soon.
Sometimes pressure is a mindset, and I think that that's what we see in Aaron Rodgers pretty often right now.
Yeah, 100%. Now, on the other side of this, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars just lost to this Miami Dolphins team that can only put up 10 points against the Bills. It's funny how these early season matchups, you get more context when you see other teams play other teams, and you're like, whoa. So, like, Jacksonville doesn't look as good as they looked in that loss even because the Dolphins got beat so bad by the Bills. I do think that Jacksonville will beat the Cleveland Browns, but it'll be interesting to see what happens and how Jacksonville responds. And Tony Wiggins talked about just that on this week's Crossover Thursday.
They lost a game they should have won last week. They had 2 minutes left to go in the third quarter. Miami had 170 yards. And they were going in for a 24-7 lead, and Travis Etienne had the ball punched out, and all hell broke loose, and they lost 20-17. So that's where we are. And around here, the fans are thinking like it's more of the same. It's the same old stuff. I don't think that. I think they're a really good football team, Jeff.
The mind is a powerful weapon, Ross, and they may be a good football team. And I think that Jacksonville is a better football team than that loss that they took to Miami. But Jacksonville has a lot of history, a lot of trauma, and a lot of scars. And especially after last year and that absolute collapse that they had, if they go 0-2 here and they lose to this Browns team who is also in turmoil right now with Deshaun Watson, the vibes are going to be so bad in Jacksonville that I think it'll impact the rest of the season. So I think this is a massive prove-it game for Jacksonville to prove that they aren't the same old Jaguars.
I think that they'll do that too. And honestly, I think that they'll do that with ease. I thought that Trevor Lawrence, at least, I mean, I know that he completed just barely above 50% of his passes against Miami's defense, right? But still looked good, still leads the team, all these other things. Like he is respected. He gets in and out of the huddle. Like they do all the things they need to do well. I think they stumbled coming out of the gate. We see this over and over again, especially with the reduction of playing time in preseasons and the reduction of contact and training camps and stuff like that. Sometimes these teams just come out and get punched in the mouth at the wrong time in that opening week. I think that this Jacksonville Jaguars team is much better than the team that they fielded last week in that loss, that big, drop-off loss where they were at one point leading 17-7. Ugly in terms of that situation. But I think that they come back off of that rejuvenated and ready to prove that they are the team that they've been saying that they are over the course of the entire offseason with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence leading the way. And I think they'll do that against what has been a massively disappointing Cleveland Browns team.
Yeah, 100%. You know what? I hate that I'm saying that, though. I got to tell you, I hate that I think the Jags are going to win and they're going to bounce back. No way. Tony, I'm sorry. Erase this
Hater.
from the internet anyway. But that being said, again, make sure that you tune in to this afternoon's edition of Locked On NFL. Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, chopping up the best NFL topics. That is going to do it for me, your host, Tyler Rowland, the Madman. Shout out to my co-host, the mastermind himself, Ross Jackson. Football is back. The weekend is here. Everybody stay safe out there. And I will talk to you on Monday.